Welcome back to ThunderCats episode by episode. This week we're looking at episode 15, The Time Capsule. Written by Peter Lawrence, it premiered on September 27, 1985. This episode opens with another scene outside the cat's lair. The Wily twins are testing out their spaceboards, hovering devices akin to a surfboard built for them by Panthro. But Cat isn't doing so well with it. Cat complains, but Kit gives him grief.
That's just 'cause you can't ride it!
While she shows off on her spaceboard, Cat, upset, is determined to take his back to Panthro to fix it. Speaking of Panthro, we see him outside the lair with Chitara, handing her back her staff.
Just like this? No switches?
Right. It's voice activated. Soon as you speak, you'll get the control center.
He's installed a voice-activated communicator into her staff and mentions how he's doing the same for everyone else. That's when we fade into the ruins featured in a previous episode with Tashi, Lion-O sitting amongst the ruins themselves. He seems melancholy, and is writing in the dirt with the Sword of Omens. As we join him, we see what's written. Thundera, the name of his destroyed homeworld. Suddenly, Jaga appears, saying Lion-O seems troubled. Lion-O asks what Thundera was like. Jaga laughs, noting that Lion-O is homesick, with Lion-O further stating that he wishes he knew more about it.
That's natural enough. You were only 12 years old when you left Thundera, and when you landed here on Third Earth, you were a man.
Lion-O asks Jaga to tell him what Thundera was like, but Jaga says he can do him one better. He can show him. Jaga then explains in a flashback that when they fled Thundera, they took a time capsule with them, stating that it has the history of their planet all the way up to its destruction. He leaves, instructing Lion-O to find it to learn about Thundera. Back at the lair, we meet the ThunderCats in mid-conversation about the time capsule, with Tigra confirming its existence. Panthro recommends that they all split up to search different sectors, utilizing their new communicators to stay in touch. The twins speak up, wanting to join everyone on their new spaceboards, but Snarf vetoes it, telling them that they're safer in the lair. Panthro backs this up and tells the twins to stay put. All the adults then take off, with Panthro in the tank and the others on foot. However, the kittens decide they're not going to be left behind and follow the adults on their spaceboards. We follow Lion-O as he and Snarf run past a unicorn heading towards the River of Despair. As they arrive, Snarf wonders how they'll get across, wishing they had taken a thunder tank. But Lion-O steps into the water to try and cross, only to immediately be attacked by a shark creature. He escapes, wondering what the creature is. A voice calls out to him, explaining that it's a creature called a Black Widow shark, revealing the speaker to be the female unicorn keeper. She explains that the Black Widow shark will attack anything that enters the river. After that, we cut to Tigra, peeking in on his molemen friends, asking them if they've seen the capsule. But the molemen are acting differently than last time, being very single-minded about digging.
A breakdown in communication.
This is when Tigra hears someone bellowing out orders to the molemen, that they haven't brought him any gold. This is Mole Master, and he's abusing the molemen for his own gain, lashing at them with a whip. Tigra doesn't care for this and reveals himself. The Mole Master isn't too happy about an intruder, and a fight breaks out. But it's clear Mole Master is severely outmatched, with Tigra's bolo whip incinerating Mole Master's and driving him off. Tigra asks the Molemen once again about the capsule, but they're still being single-minded, leading to Tigra making this statement.
Never expect a favor for a favor.
Keep this quote in mind. We'll hear it again many episodes later. Back in with Lion-O, a unicorn approaches with some sort of crystal being carried in its mouth. The Unicorn Keeper announces that soon, they'll all see the Bridge of Light, which will allow them safe passage across the river. As the unicorn places the crystal in a strange structure, a tube-like construct forms. This is the Bridge of Light. The Keeper tells Lion-O and Snarf to hurry across it, as the power doesn't last long. As they cross, the Black Widow shark attacks, slamming into the bridge. Before it attacks again, Lion-O draws and activates the sword, aiming it at the shark and firing. He discovers, though, that firing a weapon at the floor he's standing on isn't the best move, as the bridge starts falling apart from the attack. As the shark continues its relentless attack, Lion-O rushes to the exit, making it just in time before it completely shatters. As Lion-O catches his breath, he states how he hopes he never has to go through that again, but Snarf brings up a problem.
Well, there's just one thing.
What's that?
How are we gonna get back?
Leaving Lion-O, we meet up with Tigra as he reaches out to Chitara via the communicator in his whip. She's sitting on some dead trees in a swamp and confirms that she can't find anything either. As Tigra hangs up to call Panthro, Chitara gets attacked by a giant serpent. The snake tries to attack her, but Chitara's speed is too much for it, and she tricks the creature into biting itself as she gets away. We cut to Panthro in the Badlands as tiny little baby crabs carrying debris fascinate him. Tigra speaks to him, but Panthro only reports that all he can find are Beckett's audience. Following that, we catch up with the Wily twins, who are apparently following Lion-O's trail. They come across the River of Despair, only to also be attacked by the Black Widow shark. The shark destroys Kit's spaceboard, and the twins barely escape as the shark continues to attack. We meet back up with Snarf and Lion-O as Snarf complains about Jaga not just telling them where the capsule is. Suddenly, Snarf gets pulled away by a giant stone hand. Oblivious to this, Lion-O keeps walking and asks Snarf to tell him about Thundera. When he notices that Snarf's responses are muffled, Lion-O turns around to see what's happened to him. Wasting no time, Lion-O attacks the creature, destroying one of its arms with a punch. He then activates the sword and fires a beam at the creature. As the beam hits, the creature shapeshifts into a humanoid form, and Lion-O demands it release Snarf. The creature complies, and then transforms back into a pile of rocks. Lion-O isn't the only one in conflict, though. Panthro is currently engaging a Crabman. We don't know why this is happening, but the Crabman isn't happy. Panthro strikes out with his nunchucks, but the creature snaps one of the ends off with its claw, dropping crystalline powder from it. The powder ignites, giving off a gas that incapacitates the Crabman long enough for Panthro to get to the tank. The Crabman gives chase, but is ultimately repelled by the tank's protection. Lion-O and Snarf come across a cave, and Snarf notices something inside it. Lion-O uses sight beyond sight and discovers it's a capsule. He activates the sword and summons the others, who see the signal and head his way. Lion-O and Snarf enter the cave, where Snarf realizes how odd it is that this is so far from their crash site, surmising that someone had taken it there. As if on cue, grunting is heard from deeper in the cave, and a primitive man comes into view. Snarf states that he doesn't think the caveman will let them take it, but Lion-O responds about how the man isn't armed, so he doesn't really have a choice. Lion-O approaches the capsule now that the caveman is hunched over it, and communicates through gesturing that the capsule belongs to him. The caveman strikes out at him in response, and Lion-O makes a direct statement.
I'm sorry, caveman, but it is ours. We need it, and we're going to take it.
But it's not that the caveman is completely unreasonable. He's willing to let Lion-O take it, so long as Lion-O beats him for it in an arm wrestling match. Lion-O accepts, but Snarf doubts he could win. Despite Snarf's doubts, though, the match begins. Both parties strain, muscles pulsing as the contest continues. The other ThunderCats arrive, with Snarf being excited about it. However, Lion-O rejects the idea of them interfering.
No, Snarf. I'll fight my own battles. I accepted his challenge, not them.
The other ThunderCats arrive, and Tigra reaches out to help Lion-O. Panthro corrects this action.
Leave him. Let him do it. It's one-on-one.
The match continues as the others watch, but Lion-O is finally able to win. The caveman relents and communicates that the capsule is now his. Lion-O is excited that they have the capsule and asks Tigra if they can take a look at it now. Tigra responds, telling him that they should take it to the lair and inspect it first. Lion-O responds to this in a fairly mature manner.
I guess I've waited this long to find out about Thundera. Another day won't matter.
We fade back in with the capsule in the tank's mouth as the twins arrive. The adults aren't happy with this, Panthro chastising them for riding two on one board as he's told them not to. The twins argue back, saying the other board was wiped out. And Panthro suddenly embodies every parent that's ever dealt with something like this.
Wiped out? You know how long it took me to make those things.
Chitara prods the twins, stating how they got lucky they didn't run into anything dangerous. Cat and Kit nervously agree, but Tigra picks up on it.
Do I detect a false note there?
Cat cracks first, with Kit following, admitting that it was them that almost got wiped out, not just the board. Lion-O commends them for being truthful, and Panthro approaches them, telling them that a new spaceboard won't be too hard to make, and a week's grounding won't be too hard for them to take. The twins aren't happy, but Chitara ends out this episode.
Mind if I ride your board back?
Writer's commentary from Peter Lawrence. I like the Jaga figure and the relationship with Lion-O, and although it's by no means original, I like the fact that Lion-O was a child in a man's body and therefore had a lot to learn. At the same time, he had the strength and physical maturity for a real adventure. As a writer, you did not have to mollycoddle him. In The Time Capsule, we could combine Lion-O's immaturity with the real physical adventure, all guided by the ghostly but absent Jaga. What better quest for a kid than to discover his past, his family's past, and be big and bad enough to face down villains, all while guided by the wise and greatly loved Jaga. And think of this, a father figure who had no power to enforce his advice. Isn't that the best of all worlds? Until I read the summary, I had forgotten about the action involving the other ThunderCats. Essentially a subplot that kept the clock ticking, and the tension ratcheting up all the time. At least, that was the intention. One other aspect of this script, a story editor's point of view really, the writers often like to concentrate on one or another, or perhaps two, of the hero group. But we needed them all to feature, to build their personalities, their interactions in the whole family world of ThunderCats. If I had not been faced with that need and direction, I might have preferred this to be a solo story for Lion-O. David Crichton, Hear the Roar, the unofficial and unauthorized guide to ThunderCats. Now my thoughts. This episode was Peter Lawrence's first script in the series. The fact that he was able to seamlessly fit it into ThunderCats lore without missing a step is genuinely impressive. It's clear he did his homework, such as the twins echoing Lion-O's words from the pilot.
Safe is boring.
Oh, I don't want to be safe. Safe is boring.
You'll see a few other things inserted into ThunderCats' Escape from Thundera, but this is the first of them. Peter Lawrence went on to not only write plenty of other scripts, but also be a key editor for the series. Following ThunderCats, he also worked on Silverhawks, but this is the work I know him best for. I appreciate the new animation of the ThunderCats leaving Thundera. The destruction and desperation of them fleeing was a very tense flashback sequence. Not to mention just stunning visually. In fact, this entire episode is animated very well. Great movement and use of shadows. I'm not sure who the specific animators that worked on this episode were, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of them previously worked on Gatchaman. It's hard to articulate, but it's just what I'm picking up watching the visuals of the episode. One oddity I'd like to note is when Snarf is grabbed, you hear him making muffled noises, indicating that he has his mouth covered. But the animation shows his mouth was unobstructed. Since voice acting happens first in American animation, I'm curious what the script or storyboards for this episode say. Either way, this episode continues the trade of expanding the world building of this series and its characters. A great episode. But now, it's character time. Starting with the twins. Up until now, the stuff they tended to get into trouble with came from external forces that took advantage of their curiosity, such as the Tower of Baron Karnor. But here, they're fleshed out a bit more. One of the many things I like about ThunderCats is that the characters are written fairly sensibly. And here, they are absolutely written like children, from not wanting to be left out all the way to trying to get away with a lie. To their credit, they came clean by the end of it, but it's still a good detail to include. Kids don't think like adults. They're more impulsive and don't think about how their actions affect things in the long term. They also don't appreciate the time put into something due to their own general ignorance, demonstrated by Cat's lack of respect for Panthro's time in the earlier part of the episode and both of their desire to not be fully honest with him by the episode's end. Speaking of Panthro, this episode continues the theme of him constantly tinkering. The added function of the communicators with their weapons works well in both storytelling and animation functionality. They can't wear communicators. That would require a new item drawn on characters that already had their iconic looks. However, including it in their weapons makes storytelling and animation much simpler in this aspect. Panthro's work is always to try and improve an aspect of their lives in a functional way. He's a very grounded character in that respect. But despite his love of his work and the care he takes into it, his response to finding out one of the boards is gone isn't anger as one would suspect. It's more a bewilderment and taking into the fact that he's going to have to invest more time in something he had only just recently completed. The last thing any tinkerer wants to do is completely redo something they've already done because of someone else's carelessness. His punishment of the twins is also reasonable, and will teach them a lesson about time, having theirs being wasted into being grounded. A fitting punishment. There's also the added fact that Panthro understood and protected Lion-O's desire to win the capsule alone. This wasn't about ego or arrogance. This was about finishing what you started and what you agreed to. If anyone in the group understands that, it'd be the guy that builds all their tech. When it comes to Lion-O, I think he obviously has the most to talk about. His feelings of homesickness are something most people in general can relate to. But more so when you have questions you need answers to. This is something that'll ring true with a lot of military brats as well due to how often we moved in our childhoods. The majority of people grow up in the same place to adulthood. The places and people aren't a distant memory sealed away in only that specific time to them. They're things that altered and grew alongside them as time went on. That difference is why Lion-O is struggling so much, only further compounded by rapid aging. To him, his childhood was essentially yesterday, but he still can't reach what he's looking for. Luckily, Lion-O at least has Jaga to guide him to a device that could help him. I'm sure you all think that's a wonderful segue into this character. Jaga specifically. I like that this episode didn't have Jaga appear during some danger or stressful moment. He just peeked in to see how Lion-O was doing. His casual conversation tone was a good choice as well. Usually, Jaga is very direct or reserved when dropping info to Lion-O, but this time, it's just a conversation. An actual one. It was a nice touch to see Jaga popping by just to check in on him. What's odd though is that Jaga's name going forward is substituted for where someone would usually say God. Whether this leads to the narrative idea that Jaga is an XP for God, or the writers just wanted to use a spiritual character as a placeholder is for a different discussion though. The Sword of Omens doesn't do too much in this episode, but I'll talk about it anyways. There are people confused by why Lion-O didn't just use Sight Beyond Sight to find the capsule immediately. Well, think back. When Lion-O used it to find his friends, it was usually in places he could easily locate or already knew about. Even in the previous episode, it was Panthro who knew where the sword was looking. For something like Baron Karnor's tower, it's an easy landmark to find. Same for the shore when it came to the Terror of Hammerhand. But who could reasonably identify a random cave when they'd never been to it before? That's why it makes sense. Concerning its effect on the light bridge, while Lion-O says it's canceling out the sword's power, that's clearly not what's happening. Canceling would make it ineffective. It's obvious the sword did damage. Personally, I think it was to make Lion-O learn a very valuable lesson about not, well, firing in an enclosed space like that so haphazardly. Something I forgot to mention earlier that I enjoyed about this episode is that there's actually an explanation for the things going on in it. Why didn't the ThunderCats mention the capsule before now? They assumed it was destroyed in the crash. How did it get so far from the crash site? Someone yoinked it. Why not use it by episode's end? Need to make sure it's not damaged. I like it when things make sense. Peter Lawrence's first outing as a show writer went very well. Since I mentioned the future, this episode-by-episode series is taking a break, at least for next month's channel theme of Power Rangers. But we'll be back in October, and you can join me as we cover the Fireballs of Castle Plundar. If you want to support the channel, feel free to join the Patreon or memberships listed in the description. You're also welcome to join the community Discord. See you next time, and take care.
Oh, it's a negotiation, huh? All right! I'll wrestle you for 'em!